There is a quiet power in a woman who does not chase love, but becomes it. Not the kind of love that begs, not the kind that loses itself trying to be enough, but the kind that stands rooted, calm, and whole. You can feel it before she even speaks. She walks into a room and nothing is forced. Nothing is loud. Yet everything shifts because she understands something many forget. Love is not something you give away until you are empty. Love is something you cultivate within until it overflows naturally. Love begins with self-awareness. This is where everything starts, and without it, even the purest intention becomes confusion. You may think you are loving someone, but if you do not understand yourself, your emotions, your patterns, your fears, then what you call love can easily become attachment, control, or even quiet desperation. Self-awareness is the ability to sit with yourself without distraction, to observe your thoughts without immediately reacting to them, to notice your emotions without letting them define your actions. Most people do not do this. They move through life on autopilot, reacting, seeking, chasing, avoiding. And then they wonder why their relationships feel unstable, why their love feels heavy, why they feel unseen. But when you begin to observe yourself, something changes. You start to recognize your triggers. You begin to see where your need for validation comes from. You notice how often your mind creates stories that are not real. And in that moment of noticing, there is space between what you feel and how you respond. This space is power because now, instead of reacting out of fear, you can respond with clarity. Instead of holding on to someone because you are afraid to be alone, you choose connection from a place of wholeness. Instead of giving love to receive something back, you give because it is your nature, not your strategy. King, self-awareness teaches you discipline, not the discipline forced from the outside, but the quiet discipline within. The discipline to pause before speaking. The discipline to listen deeply, not only to others, but to yourself. The discipline to question your own assumptions instead of blindly believing them. And as you deepen this awareness, you begin to understand that not every emotion needs to be acted upon. You may feel anger, but you do not become anger. You may feel fear, but you do not become fear. You witness it, you breathe through it, and you let it pass. This is how you remain centered. And when you are centered, your love changes. It becomes steady. It becomes calm. It is no longer dependent on how someone treats you in every moment. It is not easily shaken by small disturbances because its source is not external. Its source is within you. Without self-awareness, people often lose themselves in relationships. They adapt, they adjust, they silence parts of who they are just to maintain connection. At first, it feels like compromise, but over time, it becomes disconnection from the self. And when you are disconnected from yourself, you cannot truly connect with anyone else. So you must return. Again and again, return to your breath, return to your thoughts, return to your inner state. Ask yourself simple but honest questions. Why am I feeling this? What am I seeking right now? Is this coming from clarity or from fear? The practice is not always comfortable. In fact, most of the time it is not. You will see parts of yourself that you tried to avoid. You will face insecurities you tried to hide, but this is necessary because only what is seen clearly can be transformed. And slowly, with patience, you begin to build a relationship with yourself, a relationship based on honesty, not illusion, on presence, not distraction. And from this relationship, a different kind of love emerges, a love that is not needy, a love that is not controlling, a love that does not ask you to lose yourself. You begin to understand that you are already enough, not in an arrogant way, but in a grounded, quiet way. And from this understanding, you no longer seek someone to complete you. You seek someone to share your completeness with. Whoa, this is why self-awareness is the foundation. Without it, everything else becomes unstable. With it, everything aligns naturally. And when you truly see yourself, you will never again offer a version of love that requires you to disappear. Okay? Do not confuse attachment with love. This confusion is the root of many silent struggles. It feels intense. It feels consuming. It feels like you cannot breathe without the other person. And because of that intensity, you call it love. But intensity alone does not make something true. Fire can feel warm, but it can also burn. Attachment is driven by fear, fear of being alone, fear of not being enough, fear of losing something that you believe gives you value. So you hold on tightly. You begin to depend on the other person for your emotional stability. Their attention becomes your peace. Their absence becomes your anxiety. This is not love. This is a lack of inner grounding. When you are attached, you are not really seeing the other person. You are seeing what they represent for you: security, validation, comfort. And when they do not meet these expectations, you feel hurt, confused, sometimes even betrayed. Not because they changed, but because your attachment created an illusion that could not last. Love is very different. Love does not come from fear. It comes from understanding. When you truly love, you do not try to possess. You do not try to control. You allow space. You respect the individuality of the other person. You recognize that they are not here to complete you, and you are not here to complete them. Attachment says, stay with me so I can feel okay. Love says, be with me because we both choose to be here. This difference is subtle, but it changes everything. When you are attached, your emotions are unstable. Small changes in behavior create large reactions within you. A delayed message, a shift in tone, a moment of distance, and your mind begins to create stories. You overthink. You question your worth. You try to fix something that may not even be broken. But when you are grounded in love, you remain steady. You communicate, but you do not panic. You care, but you do not lose yourself. You are present, but you are not dependent. This steadiness comes from within, not from the other person. Many people believe that letting go of attachment means becoming distant or cold. This is not true. It means becoming aware. It means recognizing when your actions are driven by fear rather than clarity. It means choosing to respond consciously instead of reacting impulsively. You can care deeply without losing your center. You can give without expecting something in return. You can be connected without being dependent. This is the balance that most people struggle to find, and the only way to find it is through awareness. You must observe yourself honestly. Notice when you feel the urge to control. Notice when you seek reassurance not out of genuine need, but out of insecurity. Notice when your peace depends entirely on someone else's behavior. These moments are your teachers. Instead of judging yourself, simply observe. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of right now? What am I trying to hold on to? And in that questioning, you begin to loosen the grip of attachment. Because the truth is, anything that requires you to hold on tightly is already unstable. Real love does not need to be forced. It flows naturally. It grows in an environment of trust, not pressure. When you release attachment, you do not lose love. You refine it. You remove the fear, the control, the expectation, and what remains is something much stronger, something much more peaceful. You begin to understand that love is not about having someone. It is about experiencing a connection without losing your own presence. It is about sharing your life without making the other person the center of your existence. And from this place, your relationships change. They become lighter, more honest, more real, because you are no longer trying to extract something from the other person. You are simply showing up as you are. This is where freedom exists within connection. And when you truly understand the difference, you will stop holding on out of fear and start choosing love with clarity. Inner stability creates outer strength. What you build within will always determine how you stand in the world outside. Many people try to appear strong. They control their image, their words, their reactions, hoping to be seen as confident, unshaken, powerful. But if there is no stability inside, this strength cannot last. It is only a surface. And life has a way of testing surfaces. Real strength is not something you perform. It is something you become through consistency within yourself. It is the result of knowing your center so deeply that even when everything around you changes, you do not lose your balance. Situations shift, people come and go, emotions rise and fall, but you remain steady. This steadiness is not built in comfort. It is built in moments where you are challenged. When things do not go your way, when you are misunderstood, when you feel uncertainty. These are the moments where most people react, where they lose control, where they become driven by emotion instead of awareness. But if you have cultivated inner stability, you pause, you breathe, you observe, not because you do not feel, but because you are not controlled by what you feel. There is a difference. And inner stability means you are aware of your thoughts, but you are not trapped in them. You feel emotions, but you do not let them dictate your actions. You understand that everything within you is temporary, just like everything outside of you. And this understanding gives you space. Space to respond with clarity instead of reacting from impulse. When you develop this, your presence changes. You do not need to prove yourself. You do not need to raise your voice to be heard. You do not need to force outcomes. There is a quiet confidence in the way you move, in the way you speak, in the way you choose your actions. People can sense this, not because you are trying to impress them, but because your energy is consistent. You are not easily shaken by opinions. You are not dependent on constant validation. You stand in your own understanding. And from this inner stability, outer strength naturally emerges. You begin to handle challenges differently. Instead of seeing them as threats, you see them as opportunities to deepen your awareness. Instead of avoiding discomfort, you move through it with patience. You trust your ability to adapt, not because you control everything, but because you trust yourself. This trust is essential. Without it, you will always look outside for reassurance. You will always doubt your decisions. You will always feel uncertain when faced with pressure. But when you trust yourself, you can move forward even when the path is unclear. Inner stability also brings clarity in relationships. You no longer react out of insecurity. You communicate with intention, not immediately defending yourself. You understand that not everything is personal, and not every situation requires an emotional response. This creates strength not only in you, but in your connections with others. And yet many people avoid building this stability because it requires discipline. It requires facing yourself honestly. It requires letting go of distractions that keep you from seeing what is really happening inside you. It is easier to blame circumstances. It is easier to react. It is easier to escape into temporary comfort. But these choices weaken your foundation. And when your foundation is weak, even small challenges can feel overwhelming. So you must train your mind, not by force, but by awareness. Return to your breath when you feel overwhelmed. Observe your thoughts when they become chaotic. Do not identify with every emotion that arises. Let it come, let it stay for a moment, and then let it pass. This is practice. And like any practice, it requires patience. Over time, you will notice the change. Situations that once disturbed you no longer have the same effect. Reactions become responses. Fear becomes understanding. And in that shift, your strength becomes real because it is no longer dependent on what happens outside of you. It comes from within. And when your foundation is stable, nothing external has the power to take you away from yourself. Presence is more powerful than validation. Yet most people spend their lives chasing validation, not realizing what they are sacrificing in the process. They seek approval through words, through attention, through recognition. They measure their worth based on how others respond to them. And slowly, without noticing, they move further away from themselves. Velen feels good for a moment. It gives a temporary sense of reassurance. Someone appreciates you, someone acknowledges you, someone confirms that you are enough. But this feeling does not last. It fades quickly, and then the mind begins to seek it again. More attention, more approval, more confirmation. This cycle becomes endless, and in this endless search, presence is lost. Presence means being fully here, fully aware, without needing anything to be different. It means you are not distracted by what others think of you. You are not calculating your worth based on reactions. You are simply engaged with the moment, with clarity and stillness. When you are present, you do not need validation to feel complete. You already feel grounded within yourself. You understand your value not because someone told you, but because you have experienced it through your own awareness. Many people are physically present but mentally absent. They are in a conversation, but thinking about how they are being perceived. They are listening but preparing their response. They are acting but seeking approval at the same time. This creates a disconnect, not only with others, but with themselves. True presence removes this noise. When you are truly present, your attention is not divided. You listen deeply, you observe without judgment, you respond with intention. There is no need to impress, no need to prove, no need to perform. You are simply there, and this simplicity is powerful. Because when you are present, your actions come from clarity, not from insecurity. You speak because you have something meaningful to say, not because you want to be noticed. You act because it aligns with who you are, not because you want approval. This changes the quality of everything you do. In relationships, presence creates connection, not validation. Validation may create temporary satisfaction, but presence creates understanding. When you truly listen to someone without distraction, without thinking about yourself, you give them something far more valuable than approval. You give them your attention, and attention is rare. But to be present, you must first let go of the need for validation. You must recognize when your actions are driven by the desire to be seen, to be liked, to be accepted. And instead of following that impulse, you return to yourself. Ask yourself, am I doing this to express who I am or to receive something from others? This question alone can shift your awareness. When you begin to choose presence over validation, you may feel uncomfortable at first. The mind will resist. It will ask for reassurance. It will seek confirmation. But if you stay aware, if you do not immediately react to these impulses, they begin to lose their power. And in that space, you become free. Free from the constant need to be approved. Free from the fear of being judged. Free from the pressure to maintain an image. You begin to act from authenticity, not from expectation. This authenticity is quiet, but it is strong. It does not need to announce itself. It does not need to be recognized. It simply exists. And when you live from this place, validation becomes irrelevant. Not because it is bad, but because it is no longer necessary for your sense of self. You may still receive it. People may still appreciate you, acknowledge you, respect you, but it does not define you. It does not control you. Your center remains within. This is where real power lies. Not in how many people approve of you, but in how deeply you are connected to yourself in each moment. And when you choose presence over validation, you stop performing for the world and start living with truth. Emotional discipline leads to clarity. Without discipline, emotions can become like waves in a storm, pulling you in different directions, distorting your perception, and influencing your actions in ways you later do not understand. You feel something and immediately you become it. You react, you speak, you decide, all within that temporary state. And then when the emotion passes, you are left with the consequences of something that was never stable to begin with. Discipline does not mean suppressing your emotions. It does not mean becoming cold or distant. It means creating space between what you feel and how you act. It means you allow the emotion to exist, but you do not give it control over your behavior. This is a subtle practice, but it changes everything. Most people trust their emotions completely. If they feel hurt, they assume something is wrong. If they feel angry, they believe they must respond immediately. If they feel fear, they step back or avoid. But emotions are not always accurate reflections of reality. They are often influenced by past experiences, by assumptions, by unexamined thoughts. When you lack emotional discipline, you live in reaction. Your state depends on external situations. Someone says something unexpected, and your mood changes. A plan does not go your way, and your energy drops. A small misunderstanding becomes a large conflict because it was handled without awareness. But when you develop discipline, you begin to notice these patterns. You feel the emotion rise, but instead of reacting, you pause, you breathe, you observe, You ask yourself, what is actually happening right now, and what am I adding to it through my interpretation? This pause is where clarity begins, because in that moment you separate the situation from your reaction to it. You begin to see things as they are, not as your emotions are presenting them. And from this clearer perspective, your response becomes more balanced, more intentional. Emotional discipline also requires patience. Not every situation needs an immediate response. Not every feeling needs to be expressed right away. Sometimes the most powerful action is to wait, to give yourself time to understand what you are experiencing before you communicate it. This patience prevents unnecessary conflict. It prevents words spoken in frustration that cannot be taken back. It prevents decisions made in temporary states that lead to long-term regret. Over time, this practice builds inner strength. So, you become less reactive, more grounded. You do not get pulled into every emotional wave. You remain steady, even when things around you are uncertain. This steadiness brings clarity not only in how you respond to situations, but in how you understand yourself. You begin to recognize the difference between a temporary emotion and a deeper truth. You understand when something is worth your attention and when it is simply a passing state. This understanding allows you to focus your energy where it truly matters. In relationships, emotional discipline creates trust. When you are not constantly reacting, when your responses are thoughtful and measured, others feel safe around you. They know that you will not escalate situations unnecessarily. They know that you will listen, not just respond. This creates a space where real communication can happen, but this level of discipline is not developed overnight. It requires continuous awareness. It requires honesty with yourself. There will be moments where you react, where you lose your balance, where emotions take over. This is part of the process. The key is not perfection, but consistency. Each time you notice your reaction, each time you choose to pause instead of act impulsively, you strengthen this discipline. And slowly, your default state begins to change. You move from reaction to response, from confusion to clarity, from instability to balance. And in that clarity, your actions become aligned with your values, not your temporary emotions. Now, this is how you lead with awareness instead of impulse. And when your emotions no longer control you, your decisions begin to reflect who you truly are. True love does not require self-abandonment. Yet many people enter relationships believing that to love deeply means to give everything, to adjust constantly, to put the other person above themselves in every situation. At first, this may look like care. It may even be praised as loyalty or devotion. But slowly, something begins to fade, not the relationship, but the connection with the self. Self-abandonment does not happen all at once. It happens in small moments. When you ignore your own needs to avoid conflict, when you stay silent even though something does not feel right, when you change your values just to maintain connection. Each time you choose to move away from your truth, you create distance within yourself. And the more this distance grows, the more you begin to feel lost, even while being close to someone else. This is the paradox. You can be in a relationship, yet feel disconnected. Not because the other person is not enough, but because you have left yourself behind in the process. True love does not ask for this. It does not demand that you shrink, that you compromise your identity, that you silence your inner voice. Love in its real form supports your growth. It respects your individuality. It allows you to stand fully as you are. But to experience this kind of love, you must first be willing to remain connected to yourself. This requires awareness and courage. Awareness to recognize when you are stepping away from your own truth. Courage to return even when it feels uncomfortable, because sometimes being true to yourself may create tension. It may lead to disagreement. It may even lead to separation. And this is what many people fear. They believe that holding on to the relationship is more important than holding on to themselves. But if you lose yourself, what are you really holding on to? A connection built on self-abandonment is not stable. It may last for some time, but it carries an underlying imbalance. There is always a part of you that feels unseen, unheard, unfulfilled. And eventually this will surface. True love is balanced. It is not about giving everything or taking everything. It is about sharing from a place of wholeness. You bring your complete self, not a reduced version of who you are. This means you express your thoughts honestly. You communicate your boundaries clearly. You honor your values, even when it is not easy. Not in a confrontational way, not with ego, but with calm clarity. And this clarity is what strengthens the relationship, not weakens it. Because when both individuals are connected to themselves, the connection between them becomes more real. There is no pretending, no hiding, no constant adjustment to meet expectations. There is authenticity. This authenticity creates trust, not the fragile kind that depends on constant reassurance, but the steady kind that comes from knowing that both people are being true. Of course, this does not mean there will be no compromise. Compromise is part of any meaningful connection. But there is a difference between healthy compromise and self-abandonment. Healthy compromise respects both individuals. It finds balance without sacrificing identity. Self-abandonment, on the other hand, ignores one side completely. So you must learn to recognize this difference. Notice when you are giving from a place of love and when you are giving from a place of fear. Notice when you are studying with awareness and when you are losing yourself unconsciously. This awareness keeps you aligned. Because love is not about becoming someone else for another person. It is about being fully yourself and allowing the other person to do the same. When you stand in your truth, you may not be accepted by everyone, but the connections you create will be genuine. They will not require you to pretend, to shrink, or to disappear. And this is where real peace exists, not in being needed, not in being accepted at any cost, but in being aligned with who you truly are while sharing your life with others. And when love no longer asks you to abandon yourself, it finally becomes a place where you can truly belong. Alignment with self is the highest form of peace. Not the peace that comes from silence outside, but the peace that remains even when life is not silent at all. Most people search for peace in external conditions. They think if circumstances become right, if relationships stabilize, if success arrives, then they will finally feel calm. But this kind of peace is temporary because it depends on something that is always changing. Real peace begins when you are aligned within yourself, when your thoughts, your actions, and your values are not in conflict with each other, when what you believe and what you live are not separated. This alignment creates a sense of stability that does not depend on the outside world. But many people are not aligned. They live in contradiction. They know what feels right, but they do something else because of fear, pressure, or expectation. They silence their inner voice to fit into situations. Over time, this creates inner tension. And that tension slowly becomes restlessness. You cannot feel peaceful when you are divided within yourself. Alignment begins with honesty. The willingness to see yourself clearly without distortion, to admit when you are not acting according to your values, to recognize when you are living in a way that does not feel true. This honesty is not always comfortable, but it is necessary, because without it, you cannot correct your direction. When you are aligned, your decisions become simpler. You are not constantly debating with yourself. You are not torn between what you want and what you think you should do. There is clarity, and from that clarity, action becomes natural. Even difficult choices feel lighter when they are aligned. Not because they are easy, but because they are true. You do not carry the weight of inner conflict. A misalignment, on the other hand, creates confusion. You may achieve things, you may maintain relationships, you may appear successful on the outside, but inside there is a quiet discomfort, a sense that something is not right, even if everything looks fine. This is the cost of living out of alignment. And the longer it continues, the deeper the disconnect becomes. You start to lose touch with your inner guidance. You begin to rely more on external opinions than your own understanding. You become reactive instead of intentional. Okay. But when you return to alignment, something shifts. You begin to listen again to your inner voice. Not the voice of fear, not the voice of comparison, but the quiet voice of clarity that has always been there. You start making decisions that feel right, even if they are not always popular or easy. And with each aligned choice, your peace deepens. This peace is not dependent on success or failure. It is not disturbed by praise or criticism. It remains steady because it is rooted in truth, not in circumstance. In relationships, alignment creates authenticity. You no longer act differently just to be accepted. You no longer say things you do not mean just to maintain comfort. You show up as you are. And this honesty creates deeper, more meaningful connections. Even if not everyone understands you, you understand yourself. And that understanding removes a great deal of inner conflict. Alignment also brings energy. When you are not fighting yourself internally, your energy is not scattered. It becomes focused. You feel more present, more clear, more alive. You are not constantly draining yourself through inner resistance. Kenny, this is why aligned people often appear calm, even in chaos. Not because their life is perfect, but because they are not divided within it. Of course, alignment is not a permanent state that you achieve once and never lose. It is a continuous practice. There will be moments when you drift away from yourself, when fear pulls you in one direction and awareness reminds you of another. The key is not perfection, but awareness. Each time you notice misalignment, you have a choice to continue in that direction or to return to yourself. And every time you return, your clarity strengthens over time. This practice builds a deep sense of peace. A peace that does not depend on control. A peace that does not require everything to be perfect. A peace that simply comes from knowing you are living in truth. And when you are aligned with yourself, you no longer search for peace. Outside, you become it. And so as you move forward, remember this simple truth. The way you love, the way you live, and the way you connect with others will always reflect the way you connect with yourself. When you choose awareness over confusion, presence over validation, discipline over reaction, and truth over compromise, you are no longer searching for something outside to complete you. You are building something within that cannot be easily shaken. Let love be an expression of wholeness, not a search for completion. Let your strength come from inner stability, not outer approval. Let your emotions guide you, but not control you. And let your life remain aligned with who you truly are, even when it challenges you to grow. Because in the end, the greatest freedom is not found in having everything, but in not losing yourself while living through everything. Good luck on your journey of awareness, growth, and inner alignment. Walk steadily, stay present, and trust the space you are building within yourself. Thank you